The 1998 Sydney to Hobart yacht race disaster. Yeah, this is a real interesting one. First caught my attention when I first went over to Australia in 2002, and I brought the book Into the Storm. It was called, or no, Fatal Storm. It was called, and yeah, it's hosted by the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia, and they literally sail from Sydney on Boxing Day to Hobart in Tasmania. And it's a blue water classic, and lovely fancy boats go. There's all different size boats go, and they head south through the Tasman Seas, and they go past the Bass Straits, and about 115 yachts entered this particular year in 1998, and it was the 54th annual running of the event, and it was the most disastrous in its history. And unfortunately, 6 lives were lost, 5 yachts were lost, and 55 sailors had to be rescued. And it's a journey pretty much of 628 nautical miles from Sydney down to Hobart there. And they're really, really unfortunate this particular year. And it was the largest peacetime rescue effort ever seen in Australia. And 115 starter yachts, ranging from 80-foot vessels up to down to 33 feet. Sort of some really designed to go particularly fast and enter competitions throughout different parts of the world, and some more like weekend sort of deep water cruises or around the world, small around the world sort of yachts was sort of would enter it. And I think there's like a handicap thing as well, but I mean there's different sort of categories on who wins what and stuff like that. So in 1998 there was a 4-knot current taking them down to Tasmania, with winds forecasted between 25 and 35 knots easterly. So they were expecting record-breaking event. Some of the yachts were expected to break the records. So the very first yachts which entered the Bass Strait, which is just between southern Australia and Tasmania, they encountered winds in excess of 40 knots. So of the 115 yachts which sailed down there, 71 vessels retired and 44 completed the race. So on the second day, they ran into trouble with this weather. It was the 27th of December. So severe weather struck the fleet, and a real bizarre, unusual, intense low pressure depression had developed over them. And I suppose it was back in the day when mobile phones were barely on the scene. You know, the communication is very old fashioned, and it was all set to go. Everyone's ready, and off they went. And I think it was an hour into the race, when they just literally left the harbour, is when the alarm bell started to ring. And it was back in the day when, it was just difficult. Do you know what I'm saying? But we'll go into that a little bit more. So with regards to this unusual, intense low pressure depression, there was even snow over southeastern parts of Australia, which is, for midsummer, is ridiculously unusual. So this was a real beast of a storm. And so it built into this strong storm, winds in excess of 65 knots, which is force 12. I mean, it can't get any worse, and gusts to 80 knots. So for some of these vessels, although they're really seaworthy vessels, they're not invincible. And this weather, it's just what you would call dangerous weather. It's weather you wouldn't even attempt to be out there. It's just caught you. And really, a lot of the guys who were out there during this storm, they were just fighting for their lives, really. You know, experienced sailors, some not so experienced, but they were really sort of hanging on. And it was about, you know, just, you know, so a lot of the Mayday calls went off to the Coast Guard, and you know, it was all, you know, they'd all been sort of caught out in it. So 5 yachts sunk, and 55 sailors had to be rescued, and the coroner's inquest into the deaths was critical of the race managers and the Bureau of Meteorology for the race managers observing too much and not stepping in, and the Bureau of Meteorology not providing enough updates in time. So, yeah, it was, like I say, it was the largest peacetime rescue operation in the history of Australia, and 55 sailors had to be rescued. Unfortunately, you know, 5 or 6 perished, and that was mainly due to you know, the severity of the size of the seas and the fact that they were capsizing, and they kept capsizing, and the boats were getting busted up. So they were in a position where they're trying to sort of sail, you know, storm jib and stuff like that, but they're getting knocked down as well. So unfortunately, 1 or 2 of the guys drowned. I think 1 or 2 were swept overboard, and I think there was an incident in a life raft where the guys were in a life raft and it turned upside down, and they couldn't get enough air, so they slashed the what was the you know the footwell to get some air in, and that was basically a nightmare decision, because the seas were so big it just literally swept a few of the guys out of the life raft, and they were never to be seen again. Even though they searched the next day, they couldn't find them. So yeah, and I think someone else had a heart attack. But yeah, I mean, when you know, the human body and mind is subjected to these sort of conditions, it's like being in a constant car crash, I'd imagine. You know, you'd be getting banged against the hard fiberglass, flipped upside down. You know, it's you know, it's like I say, it's just like a, you know, a disaster sort of scenario which you would never even attempt to, you know, to go out in, you know what I'm saying? And they literally, when the storm hit, they're like, you know, they're in a position where if you to continue, you don't know whether it's safe to continue in the direction you're going or to turn around and head to the mainland. The seas are so bad, you don't really know, and you're equal distance apart. It's what do you do? But a lot of them retired and they sailed into south eastern Australia, places like Bermagui and Eden and places like that, and they crawled into there. But a few of the yachts, they seem to sort of suffer the worst of it. They were sort of in an area where it was almost like the storm had sort of intensified over quite a small area. It's still bad everywhere else, but it was an area where those yachts seem to be subjected to some very severe damage. Yeah, so it's yeah, the communication with the weather is a lot better now, and they haven't had any sort of weather like that since, and yeah, it's the most disastrous in its history. Yeah, it's sort of, you know, certainly I got hold of the book. I think it was Fatal Storm. I don't know who the author was, but there's probably quite a few books on it now. And yeah, it's some of the people who actually were involved in the rescue. I mean, they just, you know, to absolutely be honoured for the sort of risks they were taking, you know, to try and rescue people. You know, in this sort of in those difficult seas, with all the, you know, the broken masts and things like that. But yeah, okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. More videos along the way. Please subscribe. If you'd like to add any comments to the video, please do.